Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
Welcome, my dear learner, to our today's lesson. We are having a lesson in history and government. I'm sure you have continued to enjoy and learn from our e-learning, from our Manifested e-learning platform. So today we continue to study the African reaction to European colonization. And today we are going to look at the Mandinka resistance. And in our today's lesson, we are going to have these objectives. We are going to have these objectives. Remember, before we look at the objectives, my dear learner, we said that the Africans had various ways of reacting to the European colonization. We said there were two ways in which they reacted. One was through resistance, and the other one was what? Can you remember the other way in which the Africans responded to the European colonization? Very good. The collaboration. So we have looked at one community or one resistance that we call the Maji resistance, and today we are going to look at we are going to study the Mandinka resistance. So in our today's lesson, we are going to learn, or by the end of this lesson, my dear learner, I want you to be able to describe the cause. That is how the resistance took place, the cause of the Mandinka resistance. And two, you should be able to outline the causes of the Mandinka resistance. So number two, you should be able to outline the causes of the Mandinka resistance. That is our second objective for this lesson. So to start as of, my dear learner, when you talk of the Mandinka resistance, this was a resistance that happened in West Africa. Let us have an illustration of the map of Africa. So this is an illustration. It's just a simple illustration of what the map of Africa looks like. Yes, looks something closer to that. Yeah. So here we have the Suez Canal. So West Africa, where we have the Mandinka resistance. This resistance happened in the Mandinka Empire that was situated in West Africa along this area. That is where we had the Mandinka. The Mandinka Empire. That is where the resistance took place. It was led by one man who was known as Samori Toure. He was the leader of this Mandinka Empire at that time. So around 1882 to 1886, Samori expanded his empire. Towards these years, he expanded and made a footstool of his empire. He started very small. He was just a normal warrior, but he learned and accumulated a lot of wealth and made his empire a very vast one. So while he was doing that, remember we said during the scramble and partition of Africa, in Egypt, the French were unable to get hold of Egypt. So they resorted to getting colonies in the Congo, where they could not also get a very substantive territory. So they resorted to come to West Africa. So at this period, when Samori Toure was laying ground, he was enhancing his empire, the French came in and also wanted to get or to take over this empire. So at this period, we saw there was a lot of military acquisition. Military acquisition. They got a lot of, or they marshaled, they organized forces. There was military forces that were organized, but there were no physical confrontations. So Samori Toure made a capital in the Mandinka Empire. His capital was at a place known as Bisandugu. Bisandugu. That was where Samori Toure made a capital, or his base of operation. This is where he organized all the trade activities. Samori Toure was a very successful businessman or merchant, right? He was a merchant, so he was very successful, and he got a lot of wealth. In his kingdom, we had a gold mine. There was a gold mine that was his source of wealth. There was a gold mine where he got his wealth. So while he was expanding and trading, he tried to entice or get peace with the French forces, because the French have come and they want to acquire part of, or the whole of the West Africa for themselves. So Samori Toure, being a very smart person, decided to make a treaty. So he made a treaty. And as we have mentioned in our previous lessons, a treaty is an agreement. So he made an agreement with the French. For peace, so that the French and the Mandinka people could live in harmony. So that treaty was known as the Bisandugu Treaty. That treaty was known as the Bisandugu Treaty. It was made in March. 28th, 1886. That was when that treaty was made, the Treaty of Peace between Samori Toure and the French. So in this treaty, they agreed to have peaceful coexistence. They agreed to have peace between themselves and friendship. But at some point, the French did not, or the main point of the French coming or trying even to make the treaty, was to get a position where they could overturn and take over that territory. So when French, or when Samori Toure discovered that the French are after his territory, or want to get where or what he has really worked upon, right? So he resorted to guerrilla warfare. After he discovered that the French are really coming against him and they are occupying most of his treaty, he resorted to guerrilla warfare. He had an army of around 35,000 men. He had an army of around 35,000 men. Of these 35,000 men, Samori Toure was a well-trained soldier. So he divided these men into 3 groups. So this is how he conducted his warfare. He divided them into 3 groups. The first one was the one that was directly fighting or advancing against the French, right? War against the French. Or against the French. And then, number 2, the second group, he divided his armament in 3 groups. The first one was the one that was involved in fighting the French. And then, the other one was involved in evacuating the people. Evacuating the people. When we talk of the guerrilla warfare, after the first group attacked the French, right? This was actually, initially, his kingdom was not as big as this. His kingdom was concentrated towards the west, right? Let's assume that is where the first or the kingdom was initially. After they attacked the French, right, they could burn down the place or the camp where they are and proceed towards the west. So the kingdom would now move. They would leave this place. They would leave, let me use another color. They would leave the first place or the first kingdom where they are and then establish another one. So let us call this one the first place where they were having the empire and the people were living. So after they make an attack, they would retreat and move eastwards and now settle at place 2. Then the second group of his army was involved in helping the people to evacuate and move towards the east or run away from those who are fighting. So as the first group is fighting against the French, the second group is moving towards the east. They and then they had a third group. They had a third group that was involved in conquering states. Remember, these places they are moving to, they have their indigenous habitats, or they have the indigenous people living in those places. So the third group of warriors or men was involved in fighting or conquering the states where they were moving to. So if these ones are evacuating to this place, the third one is now ahead, right, trying to conquer other states that after they had been attacked or after they had attacked and are moving eastwards, they would have a place to settle in. So Samori Toure was very effective in his fighting. This method of fighting, he could attack and then retreat towards the east. So the French could not be able to pursue them in time, right? They also used another tactic we call the scorched earth. The scorched earth policy. So immediately they have attacked and they have moved towards the east. They would burn down everything that they left at this place. They could carry enough that they could have or that they were able to carry, if it's food or the arms they were having. But now they could, whatever they left at the first place, they destroyed it. They burnt it down. Whether there was food in the lands, whether there was some stock that had been stored in the silos or in the granaries, they would burn them down, so that when the French would come after them, the French would not be able to get a supply of food. That would weaken them or slow them as they ran after the Mandinka people. So that was his strategy. He would first attack and then retreat. So after they have attacked, they burn everything. When they are evacuating, they burn everything and leave that place destroyed, so that when the French come after them, they will not have resources or strength to look after themselves or advance against his army. So that was a very effective way of fighting. So when he moved towards the east, he changed his capital, that was at Bisandugu. His capital was at Bisandugu. That was the first capital, assuming that was at the first. So when he settled in the second, or in the second empire, he changed his empire or his capital. His capital changed to a city that is known as Dabakalo. Dabakalo. So he has moved as they are attacking. So he has moved and created a whole new empire away from his initial one. The first empire was here. So he has moved to the second one. So at the second one, he made a capital at Dabakalo, where he was able to settle down. But you'll realize that this is where his initial capital was. And we said the main source of his power was the wealth he got from the gold mine. But now, when he moved to the new empire, he was cut off from his supply. He was cut off from his supply. He could not get the gold, neither could he get the weapons that he got through the trade. Remember, the weapons he was using, some he was manufacturing himself, but others he could get from the coast. But now he has been moved far away. So the trade links he had been turned or had been cut off. So this put him at a disadvantage. So in 1898, I want you to remember that year, right? Samori Ture decided to surrender. He decided to surrender because as he moved towards the east, he could not be able to sustain his vast army. The army needed food. The army needed weapons. And now he has been cut away from his source of wealth, the gold mine, the trade routes that he had controlled at that time, together with other reasons that we are going to discuss in our coming lessons. So in 1898, Samori Ture decided to surrender. But one thing I want you to note, my dear learner, Samori Ture put on a very long fight or a very long resistance. So you can imagine from 1896, right? But the fight started in 1891. The physical armed struggle, the guerrilla warfare, started at 1891. He had a very prolonged resistance against the French, and we are going to look at what are these reasons that gave him a very prolonged resistance. So, my dear learner, we have looked at how he has been fighting, or the Mandinka people fought against the French. They were led by Samori Ture, and we have discussed all those details. Now, let us take a step further, my dear learner, and look at the causes. What were the causes or the reasons? The causes or the reasons. The causes of resistance. What are these causes? Number one, the first thing that made Samori Ture to fight or resist was he wanted to retain the independence of the empire. That was the first reason. He wanted to regain or retain the independence of the empire. And then number two, Islam was the religion of that empire. So he looked at the French. The French were considered infidels. So while the people were fighting, they were fighting a jihad. So they were motivated. Their fight was spiritual in nature. It was backed up by their religion because they considered the French infidels, right? So they were motivated to fight. And then number three, he wanted to protect his economy. He wanted to protect his economy. That is the gold mine. The gold mine and the trade that he was carrying out. He wanted to protect his economy and the economy or the trade that he was partaking. Remember, that was the main or the center of the empire. That is where he got, or he was able to, or that is how he was able to support that empire, that vast empire. And then he was against the French selling weapons. The French were selling weapons to his enemies. He was against the French selling his weapons to his enemies. The enemies he was fighting with traditionally were being sold to weapons by the French. And then he wanted to retain his authority as the leader. He wanted to retain his authority as the leader of the Mandinka Empire. And then also he wanted to preserve the culture of the Mandinka. Wanted to preserve the culture of the Mandinka. I need to write here. Culture of the Mandinka. And then lastly, my dear learner, he wanted to safeguard his military resources. He wanted to safeguard his military resources. So these are the reasons, or the core reasons, that made Samori Toure to resist the French invasion of his land. Now, my dear learner, as we come to the end of our lesson, let me give you a question. Let me give you some questions that will gauge whether you have been able to learn something in our lesson today, and I'm sure you will be able to answer them effectively. So, questions. So, number one, discuss how the Mandinka resistance progressed. And then number two, mention the causes of Samoris resistance. Mention the causes of Samoris resistance. I'm sure, my dear learner, you are able to attempt and effectively cover those questions. So, my dear listener and beloved learner, we have come to our lesson today, and have a nice time.
Thank you for choosing to study with us. For more information, you can call us on 0724 173845.